Well, obedience certainly comes into play when you're talking about group conformity. Specifically, though, this is not so much conformity to a group, this is rather obedience to an authority figure. Okay, a change in behavior in response to the commands of others. The Milgram experiment, classic, you're probably familiar with this. You had one learner and one teacher. The learner was a Confederate, not actually a participant. All the participants were actually chosen to be teachers. Okay, and the teacher was told, listen, the learner is going to be on the other side of this wall. You're basically going through a simple task here, a basic memory experiment, supposed memory experiment. And every time they get a question wrong, you give them a little bit of a shock, okay? Supposedly, okay, the learner was actually not getting any shocks, but the teachers, the participants, thought that they were delivering these shocks, okay? They would hear these reactions, fake reactions from the actor in the other room. And they started with weak shocks, and they went all the way up as the Confederate continued to miss these questions on purpose. They would go up and give heavier and heavier, stronger and stronger shocks, okay, on this shock generator. Of course, they're not really delivering the shocks, but they think that they are. And of course, well, I say of course, you may not know this, but the Confederate faked having heart problem halfway into the experiment, said, listen, these shocks are getting a little heavy. Sorry I keep getting these questions wrong, but I got a little bit of heart trouble here. Just be aware of that, okay? Eventually, the learner here, the Confederate, they start saying, I want out of here. I want out of the experiment. My heart's giving me problems. Let me out of here. Then eventually, as the shocks keep getting higher and higher, as they get these questions wrong, they just stop responding, as if they are passed out or maybe even dead, okay, as far as the participant is concerned. So how many would go all the way was the question here. And as you'll see in this brief video here, search YouTube for Milgram experiment. I don't know how to pronounce that name, but that's the one I want you to watch. 2 minutes, 17 seconds long. There's a lot out there on the Milgram experiment, but check that one out. It describes the classic experiment very well. And it came out shortly after World War II, or at least World War II was in people's recent memories. And, a lot of people, especially in this country, thought, gosh, there was something wrong with those German people, those Nazis, because of all the horrible things they did. It must have been, you can see the fundamental attribution error here. Americans tended to think there was just something wrong with those people. Okay, otherwise, your average person would never do that, especially an American, would never do those horrible things that the Nazis did. Well, this experiment showed that that's not true. Okay, if you put people in the right circumstance with an authority figure who claims responsibility, you put people in a circumstance where they're just following orders, they'll go quite far. And this Milgram experiment has been replicated recently as well in the UK. Well, these are the results of the original Stanley Milgram experiment. On the y-axis, you have the number of participants out of the overall number who gave a certain level of shock. And these are how they were labeled on the x-axis here. Anywhere from slight shock all the way up to danger, severe shock, triple X, as if this is going to kill the person. And you can see that not exactly the majority of all participants, but a significant proportion of participants, over 25%, went all the way. Okay, and if you add these bars together, you get over 50% of people who at least gave very intense shock. Okay, all the way up to potentially, as far as they were concerned, killing the person. Okay, so very important stuff. This reveals some very interesting information about human nature. Okay, how far people will go, the horrible things they might do if there's just a simple authority figure there telling them to move forward. Another illustration of this Stanford prison experiment. I won't spend as much time describing this one. Philip Zimbardo in the 70s here. But he divided participants into guards or prisoners. The guards these were all just undergraduate students like yourselves. The guards ended up becoming very cruel. The prisoners became weak and subordinate. The experiment had to be terminated after 6 days due to increasing cruelty, and a lot of the so-called prisoners just falling apart, really getting stressed out. Okay, there were a lot of ethical issues with this experiment too, but really it revealed a lot about human nature, about what the power of the situation, okay, as to what it'll kind of turn people into. And Philip Zimbardo himself describes this experiment, shows how most evil comes from hierarchy in this video I want you to look up and watch before you get into the next segment with me here. It's 6 minutes, 47 seconds long. There's a lot out there on the Stanford prison experiment. I only want you to watch this one. Well, you can watch others if you want, but I can't vouch for them. I think this one is one of the best ones. Okay, in the next segment, which will probably be the final segment of this lecture, I will get into prejudice and discrimination.